Men have a hard enough time finding and attracting a woman. But what if I told you that was the easy part? That retaining the woman and maintaining the relationship was a whole different ballgame. That requires just as much, if not even more effort than ever before. So to help you guys figure out exactly how to do that, I welcome back to the show Richard Cooper today. Now, Rich has helped thousands of men maximize their masculine potential to better understand this whole game of mating and dating on his various social media platforms, and also through his best-selling book, The Unplugged Alpha. So let's get right into it. Rich, welcome back to the podcast. I feel like this is just becoming a regular thing for us.
Yeah, I think this is number 2 or 3.
3.
3. There we go.
I'm really excited because you have another book out. Your new book is called The Top Shelf Man: How the Top 5% of Men Build Wealth, Live Life on Their Own Terms, and Keep High-Value Women.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I sent you an early copy. It's available on Amazon right now in all formats except for Audible. That'll be out in a month or so. I figured you would want to have a conversation about it because there's a lot of stuff in there that you would definitely want to get an expansion on. I bet you're even going to challenge me on today too.
Maybe on a couple things. Your new book really kind of expands upon your other book, your first book, The Unplugged Alpha. So let's go ahead and start right into the first section, which is the wealth creation. Why is it so important for men to not only just make a living, but to actually strive to obtain wealth?
Money is a very important thing for guys, especially on the sexual marketplace, because without it, you're not that significant. It opens doors, it creates options for you, it gives you the ability to say no to people when it's not a good fit. I think that men especially severely underestimate the importance of creating some level of renown for themselves and some value. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, money still seems to be the most important measure of a man's value. So I spent a good part of the book in the opening sort of talking about the different wealth creation methods, which one works, what the disadvantages of them are as well. I put a little more focus on entrepreneurship because that's the chosen path that seems to work the best for most people. Money is important. I mean, without it, you got to be a really good looking hot dude to get a woman to look your way, because a rich man will change a broke woman's life, but a rich woman really won't look a broke man's way for very long unless he's super hot.
Like when women are looking at men and they're saying, well, I'm coming out of college making $60,000 a year. Are they expecting men to make more? Like, how much more significant money does a man need to make over his woman?
It really depends on the guy. There was a couple of guys a few years ago that put together this website that took data from U.S. surveys based on height, looks, and wealth. And the shorter you are, the more money you have to make to be more significant with women, unfortunately, for the guys that aren't genetically gifted in that area. But women generally want to be with a guy. They'll say at their level, but what they really mean is at a greater level. And generally that means like 20-25% better off than they are. The better off you are, the more likely you are to attract and retain better women. Or at the very least, it creates more optionality for men so that they can choose from a larger pool of women, because success and wealth is a strong measurement and a strong draw for women.
Do you think it's impossible for a man who is making less money than the lady in his life? Is that relationship sustainable? Hey, I'm just swinging in real quick to make sure that you have hit that subscribe button, because we all know there's no such thing as too much Monica in your life. Also, I want to let you know about my community on School. It's a platform that allows us to take these conversations and these ideas that we start right here on YouTube and take them into a more in-depth conversation. So if you're having relationship problems you want my opinion on, head over there now, and I'll put that link in the description as well. And finally, everyone, we all know that Christmas is coming. And we all know you guys are awful at shopping, and I'm going to help you out right here. So head over and get yourself a Cup Cozy pillow. It's a soft, portable cup holder where you can put all your drinks, your snacks, your remotes, everything that you need, exactly where you want it. I'm the inventor and the owner, Amazon or cupcozypillow.com. Now that I've solved your shopping dilemma, let's get back to the episode. Do you think it's impossible for a man who is making less money than the lady in his life? Is that relationship sustainable?
I mean, they work. There's lots of women that are very well off that make more money than their husbands. I don't know that they have a lot of legs. They seem to be the ones where, the guy's like a stay-at-home dad or a Mr. Mom, or he makes less. One of the key predictors for a divorce is when women get promoted and become more successful and make more money, and he kind of just stays the same. That's
Right.
a pretty strong indicator that the clock's ticking down to the end of that relationship, because women don't really like guys that kind of just tread water in life. They expect them to progress along with them. They would want to be like a quote unquote team or a quote unquote partner, as they tend to use that word a lot. So it's pretty important. I mean, if you want to have a good outcome in life as a guy, and not just to attract or retain women, but just in general, you really have to figure out your money situation. It's not a good idea just to be average. Average just isn't good enough. It might have been good enough for my granddad's generation or my great granddad's generation, where you could have a job at a toothpaste factory, screw it on a cap, and you'd come home, you'd have a house, you'd have a car, white picket fence, you could have a stay-at-home wife and pay for everything. But times have changed a lot since then. And with so many women in the workforce, in many cases out earning men, and in many cases having more degrees than men, becoming homeowners sooner, with greater equity in the house than men in a lot of cases. They have the expectation, again, because women are hypergamous, that the guy that they want to be with is better off, and that they have something of some significance to bring to the table.
We see that a lot with women, especially if they were stay-at-home wives and their youngest kid gets to a certain age and then they go back to school, and then all of a sudden they say she goes to nursing school. She's walking out at 60, 80,000 a year, and all of a sudden, she ends up filing the divorce papers. He spent this money putting her through school, and she has in her mind leveled herself up, and that value, that gap is no longer there.
It's a really significant thing, and I'll share a story with you. So, when I was in my 20s, like I've always been a car guy, so I always have a good mechanic on my dial. And I used to work with this. He was in his 50s, like this Italian guy, and he used to drop me off after I would, drop off my car, and we'd get talking. He told me about how he bought a condo downtown for his wife so that she could get a law degree and go to law school. And he was a mechanic. He owned a shop. He had a bunch of mechanics that worked for him. Not the most prestigious placement, but he had enough money to pay for the family, 4 kids, his wife's degree, the extra condo downtown. And when she got the degree and she graduated, she ended up divorcing him. He had a heart attack a couple years later. He was found dead on the floor in his shop, with his French bulldog licking his cold face when they walked into the shop. These sorts of things happen. That's just the reality of life. And I think that, if men can accept it and look at it for what it is, then you're better off. You can move on from that once you understand it.
You talked about the entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. So this is just something that we naturally, navigate towards. And there was a lot of things that you've learned in your journey of entrepreneurship. And I've also come to the same conclusion. There's things that you need to know, or the mistakes that you need to avoid. One of them, you wrote here, of not generating recurring revenue. And that's something I came to the epiphany of, as well as being a mistake and working towards fixing myself. Why is it important to have the recurring revenue versus just selling a one-off product and being done?
Yeah, well, I mean, having MRR, which is monthly recurring revenue, is it's just a great business model to have. I mean, you open up the door at the start of the month, you've got a bunch of people's credit cards on file, ACH, you've got some kind of recurring payment coming from people. So you know exactly what you have coming in every single month. You can measure it. You can measure the churn, so what percentage of your clientele drop. It's also more sellable, in my opinion. I mean, if you have a book of business that you have recurring revenue that's guaranteed to pay out a certain amount per month, if somebody comes along that wants to buy your business, you're going to get a better multiple because you have steady money coming out of the business. I remember when I was younger, when I started at my first business in the debt settlement industry, my accountant called it the goose that laid the golden egg, because we would have clients on our book of business for usually a 48-month contract. And you would always know what was coming in every single month. And he was very pleased with the numbers. It was super easy I'm not going to say it was super easy for me to run the business. There was other problems, obviously, but it made certain problems sort of go away by creating a business that has recurring revenue. That's different from the guy that's, going around knocking on doors, offering to power wash your driveway once in the spring, or clean your windows once in the fall, or clean your gutters, once in the fall. That's kind of a one-off thing. You don't really have a customer for life. So think like Netflix is a strong example of something with recurring revenues, subscription to Spotify. A lot of software businesses have, some kind of a recurring revenue model. And that's why they sell for bigger multiples. They're a lot more steady and safe businesses to run.
Oh, that makes sense. And even if you do have a productized business, my business is Cup Cozy Pillow. A lot of the mistakes that I made, or just not even mistakes, but just the things you don't know that you don't know, such as, okay, we have this product that sells for $35. We're going to net, after all is said and done, $8 profit of it. How many times can we resell that product to another customer? Make all this effort to acquire a customer for a 1 or 2 or 3 time purchase, whereas like a vitamin or a supplement or a food product, something like that, where, okay, yeah, you spend some money to get them, but these people are going to be coming back. Even if you don't have a monthly recurring revenue, at least you have a product that they're going to be buying multiple times, potentially for years. I really love also the trades. The trades, I just think, are where it's at. I would love to buy a plumbing or electrical, or these businesses where they are kind of like, when you have a water leak, that has to be fixed. These are non-optional types of services. What do you feel about the trades?
They're great, but they're not recurring revenue. So if you have a water leak, the plumber comes over and fixes it, and then you won't see him again until you have another water leak, or you want to install a dishwasher or something like that.
Right.
So they're kind of a eat what you kill kind of business, right? Like you book the service or the product if you're going to sell it. It's a one-time thing, and that's it. Like, you'll buy a furnace every 10 or 15 years, right? You'll get a water leak every few years or something like that that needs the attention of somebody. That's not to discount the importance of the trades. I have a lot of friends that are in the trades. They work very hard. There's a benefit of getting paid cash a lot of the times. Like, I know a lot of the guys in the trades that just have stacks of like actual cash, so they pay a lot less in the way of taxes. So there's some benefits to it, but for me, I don't love the idea of like, driving somewhere, performing a service, and then not getting money from that customer again for maybe another 3 years, if at all.
Where's your mindset about the value of going to college? Are you advising young men that it's worth their time?
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of post-secondary, universities and colleges. A lot of them nowadays are indoctrination camps into turning men into soft, weak versions of themselves, with some exceptions. So if you want to become a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, like some kind of a licensed professional, a pilot, you need some kind of training, professional designation, and then you can earn a very strong income. A friend of mine's an ER doctor. He makes $800,000 a year in the States. So it's a very good job, right?
Right.
I know engineers, tech leads that work for the FANG companies like Amazon, Netflix, Google. They can make $900,000, $1.1 million a year. Like, they've got very good compensation packages because of their designation. So if you're going to go to a college or a university, go for those kinds of designations. There's downsides though, and I mentioned it in my book. Like, one of them might be, if you can kind of jog your memory back to the recent scamdemic, there was a lot of guys that were forced to take a unproven, untested jab, we'll call it, that we were told was safe and effective, that was proven not to be, and their health consequences and the deleterious effects of that downstream are still felt. So, I mean, you could be forced to do that. You could be forced to do woke stuff and put things in your bio, your email signature, like pronouns that you don't agree with, or celebrate certain events because corporate wants to shove it down your throat. So there's some disadvantages, but that's commonly what my parents and my great grandparents, would have forced on our lineage, because they were good jobs, they were secure, they pay well, they're well respected, they're well regarded. If you look at the data on the kind of professions that women love the most, I think lawyer at a law firm, partner at a law firm ranks the highest, with pilot being number 2.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about the 4 quadrants. There's a distinct pattern when working with the thousands of men, and they typically fall into one of 4 quadrants. Can you kind of lay out what those are?
It's laid out in the book, but if you can just imagine on your screen a big plus symbol. On the top half, you've got the unplugged men. On the bottom half, you've got the plugged in men. On the left-hand side, you've got the alphas. On the right-hand side, you've got the betas. And most guys fall into the plugged in category. I think the vast majority of the population is mostly plugged in. They love the comforting lies. They love listening to big government. Wear your mask, stand on your dots, take these jabs. It's all good for you. And they sort of agree and they go along with it. And that's the vast majority of guys. And that's also happens to be the vast majority of guys that don't get great results out of life when it comes to making money, dealing with women, optimizing themselves to become a top shelf man, as the book is titled. So that's why I sort of described it to give guys a visual. I'm very visual, so I figured it'd be a good way to sort of break it down for guys so they could see where they're at. And then there's descriptions on each category so they can understand, where they sit today. Because how do you improve if you don't know where you're at today? You have to figure out where the starting line is.
You put this down as 70% of men are in that plugged in beta. I actually think that's a little low.
It's pretty high. It would be really tough to get exact data, but I would estimate about 70 to 80% are probably most of the guys out there are just going along to get along. Happy wife, happy life. Be your best friend, be a shoulder to cry on. They tell men to do the right thing and they tell women do what's right for you. So guys will sort of like naturally fall into that category, which just doesn't really work, if I'm being absolutely honest. I mean, I've lived in all four of those categories. I talk about it in the book, and how it sort of changed throughout my life and the trajectory. But you can move around. You're not locked in a certain area. You just have to understand where you're at and then look at the differences between them and decide where you want to go and then do the work to get into the next category.
Are you finding that most beta men, are they aware they're betas?
Not really, no. I think it takes some kind of chaotic event, like some sort of trauma. Something happens at work with their boss, their wife cheats on them. They thought everything was okay in the relationship and she divorces him or something like that. They find out that their children aren't theirs. There's something that usually, like some sort of chaotic event that comes their way, and then it forces them to take a very strong look at their life and self-reflect and then start asking questions. I think men are better problem solvers than women are. Like there's advantages and disadvantages to both the sexes, but I think men inherently go looking for answers and try to solve problems. So when the chaos comes, I think they're more likely to want to do something about it. Whether they're successful or not at that, or they have the tools and resources, is another question. That's kind of the point of the book, is to help guys, level up throughout life. But most of them don't know that they're there. And even when the chaos comes, they aren't really they're not equipped very well to sort of improve that, if I can put it that way.
Conversely, on the level, the Unplugged Alpha, the very top level, you estimate about 5% of men fall into that category. I think you were being generous, to be frank.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit generous, but I'm trying to make the book palatable.
Well, there you go. I like your generosity. There has to be some kind of event that causes one to question, how am I here? What happened? Whether that is being cheated on, a divorce that he didn't see coming, or some other event that has to kind of start that momentum in that direction. Once that happens, men typically go through an angry phase. And do they get stuck there? What happens next?
Anger is a legitimate response in the face of an injustice. I've said this many times. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to go to Angry Town. And some guys take it a little more extreme and they go down the route of like MGTOW, which is an acronym for men going their own way. And they state that they're completely disconnected from the sexual marketplace. They don't want to deal with women. They've had enough, sort of thing. I think that can be a kind of nihilistic place to go, and it's probably not good for most guys. But again, it's okay to get angry. It's just part of the healing process, to like fix yourself. The key thing is get mad, figure out what happened, understand why you're mad, and then start taking appropriate steps, equip yourself with the right knowledge and tools, and level yourself up so that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. I tell guys, don't lose, learn, right? Like every hardship, every difficulty that comes your way, there's a lesson in it. There's a silver lining in absolutely everything that slams you across the face.
Don't get bitter, get better. Yeah. If you can learn the lessons, what to not do next time, when these guys do go seeking for answers, they typically go online, and then they're going to find, people like you. They're going to find a lot of other guys, maybe some females. There's problems if they're following people who might not be the best. What's your experience with the quality of creators or people in this space? What's your experience with that?
The vast majority of them, I'm going to say no. There's some information that some bad men put out that is actually good. I kind of talk about it in one of the chapters of my book titled The Manoswamp, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek name that I gave to the manosphere, because there's a high concentration of decent information, in some cases very good information, but produced and published by guys that really aren't good men or good at being men. And I provide some examples in that chapter, as far as what I saw when I sort of, dealt with that community quite a lot. So you got to be really careful. I think that one of the mistakes that guys make is that they'll take everything at face value. It's like anybody with an internet connection and a camera and a microphone can now broadcast. The barrier to entry to write a book is gone completely. 20 years ago, you needed a publisher. Now you can just write a book and upload it to Amazon. Whether it sells or not depends on if you have an audience, but the barrier to entry to everything is completely gone now in most cases. So there is a lot of content creators that put out content. And I think one of the things that you should look out for, if I'm being honest, is look for a seasoned gentleman, like somebody that's lived some life. I've always gotten my advice from guys older than me. So look for somebody that's lived a life. Unfortunately, some of the younger people, they love categorizing, an older generation as the boomers, or you don't know what you're talking about, or whatever that happens to be. But that's where wisdom typically comes from, basically, is, people that have sort of lived it. So look for guys that have either made their wounds their work, which was my path, or guys that are actual, experts in the area. Guys like Dr. David Buss that, has a facility called the Buss Labs and puts out lots of research on evolution psychology. Guys like that are also extremely good as well too. Some of them are kind of plugged in with some of the narratives that they put out. Like I've heard some, guys that are licensed doctors or researchers or scientists, and, they'll regurgitate lines like happy wife, happy life, sort of thing. Or if your wife denies you sex, then, maybe ask her if you can make her a bag of popcorn, or if she'd like to go for a walk instead, or something like that. So they don't really provide some of the best actionable advice beyond the research. So there's the interpretation part, which also has to sort of combine with the research. What I did, Monica, was like, I had a series of bad events that hit me. We talked about this before in one of the other podcasts. And it forced me to self-reflect and make my wounds my work. And I started reading Evo Psych. And I even, indulged in the manosphere and looked at dating gurus and coaches and red pill and all that kind of stuff. And I took everything that worked. And that's essentially what my books are, is this is a collection of the stuff that I've seen work based on my experience, based on the experiences of the thousands of guys that I've coached, based on the calls that I get on my podcasts. That's where I've put myself, basically.
I like to go with that narrative too. I'm always like, hey, I'm just giving my opinion here. Take what works, leave what doesn't. It's no skin off my back. This is just what worked for me. Yeah. You spoke about the licensed professionals, and what's really difficult, if people are having difficulties in the relationships, they'll often go to licensed professionals, maybe even to pastors. You don't even know what quality of relationship. Are they successful in their life? They have a degree, but are they able to take that degree and do something with it themselves? I don't know who you're getting advice from. We don't know just because they're licensed professionals that they really have their own personal skills to give you effective advice. And then you're also dealing with the effect that they're raised in the system that does placate to women, where everything has to be affirmed as being right and true. Oh, we got to acknowledge her feelings, even if she's being ridiculous. So there's problems no matter which direction, if you go to people online who are non-professionals and even to professionals. So it is very much a situation where you have to just kind of piecemeal from many, many different people, I think, to get a good solution that might work for you. Your last book had a red flag chapter, and some people said that that's a bit doom and gloom. And so you decided to add green flags. What are some of the green flags that men should be looking for?
Yeah, I broke down quite a few of them. So just off the top of my head, I mean, you want a woman that is like a cheerleader. She's about your mission. She supports it. She's respectful. She finds a way to integrate herself into your life and be useful in your life, maybe integrate into your family, be useful to your family, help them out. Those are some of the main ones that sort of come front and center. Yeah, that was the point, really. Is a lot of people were like, yeah, I like the red flags and I get it, but it seems kind of doom and gloom. Can you tell us what to look for? So I gave everybody a chapter this time on green flags, and I think it's a nice piece that sort of helps you look for like the bright triad traits, for example, and to avoid the dark triad traits. And there's a few other fillers in there that don't come from psychology or Evo psychology that I just noticed based on, the behaviors of, people in relationships and through my coaching as well. So there's lots of useful tools in that chapter too.
The one that you noted, and I think is probably the most number one, is emotional maturity. There's a lot of
Yeah.
women and men who aren't emotionally mature enough to even understand the depth of the commitment that they're even signing up for. And,
Hmm.
we all do start off, young and dumb. And if you get married in your 20s, the person you are at 20 is going to be different than the person you are in your 40s. But there does need to be some level of emotional maturity as a person who is entering into a relationship in a marriage long term. So that's a big one. Another one you mentioned is her health and appearance. I think this is one that is super important. She's going to have some standards, like she's going to have some personal standards for herself. And when you're able to say no to the foods that you want to eat, and you're also able to have the discipline to show up and work out when you don't want to, that is a high indicator of discipline, emotional maturity, stability. So yeah, find a gal who hits the gym and is going to maintain her appearance, not only for because she has a standard for how she looks, but because of the underlying characteristics that shows. What's the difference between like a vanity and just somebody who is, taking care of herself?
I mean, I think anybody that takes care of themselves is going to be accused of being vain. I've certainly been accused of being vain. I'm sure you have. Envy always comes from beneath, and it never comes from somebody that's better off than you. It always comes from somebody that's not in the greatest shape, hasn't looked after their health, hasn't prioritized it, is overweight, might have cardiovascular disease or diabetes, or this is where you start hearing things like, you're beautiful at any weight. And that's just a ridiculous lie that we tell society that needs to be destroyed. It's simply not true, and it's unhealthy. So yeah, you will be criticized when you're doing more and you look good, and that's fine. And there's probably a degree of, vanity or even a, amount of narcissism that exists in your life because yeah, you go to the gym, you look at yourself in the mirror when you're working out because you look good. So what? Like that's part of the reward of doing the work and put it in for yourself. I mean, who doesn't want to look good naked, right? I mean, you want to attract the opposite sex, look good naked. It's simple.
Yeah, it really does make life a lot better. I'll tell you that way. And especially as a woman, I know guys can have a beer gut and it's not going to impact his willingness to want to get naked or have a problem with it. Like he's ready to go. But for women, if they're not happy with their appearance and their body, they feel so shameful many times that they're like, no, I don't want him to see me naked. It's really going to impact the way a woman sees herself sexually.
When you're about to get intimate with a woman and she wants to turn off the lights or get under the sheets and like hide herself, it's just like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, it makes it difficult. You definitely show up differently. The clothes fit you better. You feel better. Like you don't have to try to find clothes that make you look good. All your clothes look good on you because you're fit and healthy. And I've even noticed I've had in the last 3 months my in-laws, friends being like, you're so tiny, and it's almost said in a way that is not a compliment. I'm 5'2", 115 pounds. I'm just normal. I think our perception of what being in shape has vastly been skewed by the fact that half of America is obese.
I think the average weight of a North American woman today, Monica, is something like 180 something pounds.
Yikes.
That's the average weight of a North American woman.
I think I looked it up in the 1950s. For the exact same person, like my same height, was 120. You guys can fact check me this because I just looked this up. I was discussing this with my husband, but now the average weight of a 5'2" is 135 or 140. So it has gone up. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the game. If women are viewing men as mainly success objects and men are mainly viewing women as beauty objects, how does this play out in everyday life?
Well, it's not playing out very, very good because women are taking on the traits of men because there's kind of an absence of masculinity, and in vacuums they sort of fill. So where men are not able to or capable to provide and lead a family or a woman, That forces women to get in the workforce and get degrees and climb the corporate ladder and put off families, and they become quite successful and resourceful and competent. The problem is that they basically turn themselves into men, which men don't want, right? Like, successful guys with money and resources and competence and renown aren't looking for a boss girl. They want a demure, sweet, respectful, useful, pretty girl that's in their frame. And they're happy to share their resources and sort of protect them and, look after that relationship in exchange for the beauty, the purity, the sexuality, and all that sort of stuff. And guys, on the other hand, aren't really chasing excellence like they used to. They're told, you're fine as you are, just be yourself. One day the right girl will come along, sort of thing. And there's a lot of complacent guys that just sort of like don't really make a huge effort in life. And that's a big mistake on the guy's part, is they're becoming softer and weaker and more feminized. And as a result, women are becoming stronger and more masculinized. And that creates a void. That means that there's less guys, top shelf guys for women that are successful and competent. And these guys on the bottom, most of the plugged in betas don't have a lot of optionality. They're forced to, if they settle for anything, they're not settling for the best or even close to the best. They're dealing with a lot of red flags, women that don't have green flags. They invite chaos into their life, or they don't even deal with women, or they're not capable of attracting or retaining women. So it doesn't play out very well today. The ideal situation that works is men focus on becoming successful, becoming competent in their realm of expertise, developing renown for themselves and presenting themselves to the world as a success object. And women are better off preserving their value and their beauty and their purity because they're beauty objects to men. But that's been kind of flipped around on its head right now. And that's one of the things, I sort of talk about in the book, is like, this isn't our grandparents' generation anymore. And times have changed, and they're going to keep changing. And I don't think they're going to change much for the better. So the book is kind of like a guide, if you will, for men on sort of how to navigate this crazy world that we live in today.
Right. The selection for the quality of men that women do find attractive and want to go to and actually do have what you refer to as genuine burning desire is less and less, and the women making more money. It's a very interesting time. Things are shaking out. There's a ruffling and trying to see where things are going to settle. And that's what we're kind of in the middle of right here. It is just human nature to be lazy and complacent. And especially after you get married, because you think, oh, okay, good, I secured the girl. My job is done here. Mm-hmm. It's really not the time to start becoming complacent and lazy, because you are underneath the notion or the guidance that hypergamy doesn't just end because of the fact that you took a walk down the aisle. Does the level of hypergamy stay the same for women after they get married, or do you think that there's a tapering of it? What's your thought on that?
Hypergamy is a puzzle with many pieces. That's kind of how I describe it in the chapter in the book. You could talk about that for hours. Right. They could write books on it. There are books, written on it. The thing being is that for women, their needs kind of shift as they get older, as they acquire wealth, as they have children and get divorced, and their financial situation changes, their hormone panel changes as they get older. What they're interested in their 40s is different than what they're interested in their 20s. They prioritize different things. But at the end of the day, all that hypergamy really means is that women want to be with a guy that they can look up to, that they can respect, that they can admire, that they can even adore, right? There has to be this dynamic between the adorer and the adored. And I think for women to be satisfied, they have to find themselves in a situation where they adore a man and that he is the adored in that relationship. Because that'll satisfy a big chunk of her hypergamy. So as long as that box is ticked, things generally work pretty well. But you're not guaranteed anything over the long haul, and things change, and circumstances can change, and guys can typically get lazy in longer term relationships. They go through betatization through 1,000 concessions. They stop gaming their wives. They say yes more when they should probably continue to say no, as they did earlier on. and then they wonder 5, 10 years down the road why their wife doesn't want to sleep with them anymore. They're not having a great relationship. They're yelling at each other all the time. They're getting divorced, things like that. The burden of performance in a relationship is really on a guy to manage, because if you put the woman in the driver's seat, it's just not going to work out. She's like, the clock will tick down to the end of that relationship at some point.
A lot of men think, well, she's an adult woman. Why do I have to manage her? We're partners, and we just sit things down and come to agreement. And I was like, okay, well, that just means that you haven't come to a situation yet where an agreement can't be met. I'm of the notion that there's no such thing as true partnerships, because if as a man you go against what your woman wants after you've discussed it, you're going to pay a severe price for going against that. So
you will get punished as a man if you take the
punished.
partnership sort of angle to it. I said in the book that you're not running a law firm. It's not a partnership. There's a driver's seat in a car and there's a passenger seat. The man sits in the driver's seat, the woman sits in the passenger seat, and that's just the way that it is. And that's what has always worked and what continues to work. When you flip those roles around and then you start doing things like negotiate, one of the things that I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about in his series on marriage was, you have to sit down with your wife and negotiate everything down to where the scissors go in the utility drawer. And that's the biggest crock of shit I've ever heard. That's not a point that you need to negotiate. In fact, I would argue negotiating in a relationship really isn't that smart of an idea. You're the man, you need to lead. In many cases, you're going to tell her how things are, and she's either going to follow or she's not. And it's comply or goodbye in situations like that. And that's really where, you sort of go through the vetting process and, decide whether or not this is a kind of woman that wants to be a complement to your life, that will be respectful, that will follow your lead. But you also have to be the top shelf man to get her to submit to you. Women don't want to submit to a loser. They don't want to submit to a guy on the bottom shelf. Again, that's one of the great purposes of this book, is to add some clarity to men's lives so they know how to deal with these things, so they have the equipment to sort of navigate. And there are prescriptions in the book that tell you exactly what to do.
Oh, absolutely. Guys have to develop balls of steel. That's maybe a bad word when it comes to kind of telling his wife or his girlfriend or whatever the case is, this is how it's going to be. He has to be willing to say, hey, okay, if she doesn't want to come into my frame, into the way that I lay out how things are going to roll in this relationship, in this marriage, then I'm okay with her divorcing. I'll be sad about it. I can't get enough guys to get to that point yet in which they really do need to have that leverage and the balls of steel to just lay out how it's going to be.
And that comes from optionality, right? Like, being the guy on the top shelf means that you have optionality. Women aren't going to respect you if other women don't want you. It's as simple as that.
Right. And women don't need valuable men. If he is truly a highly valuable man, I actually had a consult the other day with a guy, like he is a guy that every woman, he checked all the boxes. Good looking guy, made a boatload of money, in his 30s, got together with a woman a decade older than him. And I was like, do you want children? Like, what are you doing? What is she bringing to the table here? Because I had to remind him that he has all the leverage in the relationship. And sometimes guys just need to realize that they have all the leverage. And if they don't, then they need to work on becoming the man who does.
It's tough. I've talked to a lot of those guys too. Like, a lot of the most successful entrepreneurs that I've met in my life are mostly plugged in to comforting lies. Some of them are alphas, some of them are betas, but they're mostly plugged in. I haven't met very many entrepreneurs that are like true unplugged alphas. They're really tough to find. And it's so wild to me, because they can be an absolute weapon in their business world, in their company, and lead it and not take any crap from anybody. And then they come home and they're absolutely wrapped around their wife's pinky finger and told exactly what to do. And it's tough, because, you can do so well in business and life, but suck in relationships at the same time, unfortunately.
That's true. It's almost like they spend all their frame and efforts, and then they don't have anything left. All right, let's go ahead and talk about more mistakes that kind of some men make. And we talk about the nice guy versus a kind man. We hear this term, nice guy, and you want to be thought of as nice. What's the difference between the two, being nice versus being kind?
Well, I mean, the biggest difference is that nice guys are usually people pleasers and they create covert contracts in their head, right? So it's like they think in their head, if I buy her house in the neighborhood that she wants and I renovate the kitchen the way that she wants and I build the in-law suite and move her parents in, you know, these covert contracts that they make that aren't actually signed between two people, he thinks that, you know, he's going to get her best out of that relationship. So that's the first thing that generally happens. The other thing too is they just people please everybody, right? They don't have the ability or they lack the ability, you know, to say no, to sort of lead things, to, you know, put themselves in a position where, you know, they're essentially anti-fragile, you know, if I can put it that way. Like, you know, whenever chaos sort of comes at them, they don't sort of roll with it. They don't go with the punches. They don't sort of like, you know, just, you know, bend over and take it sort of thing. You can be a very kind man. You know, you know, as an example, I walked in the coffee shop a couple of weeks ago. I was with some friends, and there was a guy in a wheelchair sitting out front, and he said, "Hey, could you get me a bagel with some cream cheese on it?" I didn't even flinch. A bagel's a couple bucks, no big deal. The guy's obviously, you know, down on luck. You know, grab my coffee and my stuff. I walk out, hand him a bagel. I said, "You know, you have yourself a great day." Like that's what a kind man does. A nice guy, you know, he's going to people please. They just try to like earn people's affection by pleasing them in areas that really don't level up anything for them, if I can put it that way.
Underneath it, I feel like it's just you don't even know who that man is because it's a front. It's like this: the
It is
nice
a
guy
front,
puts
yeah.
on an appearance, and you don't even know like how he feels about anything because he just goes along to get along. The guys who are solid enough to be self validated and not need the
Mhm.
validation of other, whether it's men or women, will be thought of sometimes as assholes because they do have enough backbone to not stand down. I know some guys at my husband's work thinks he's an asshole, and I'm like, I like that. I
Yeah.
like that because that means that you actually have an opinion. If everyone's liking you, there's a problem.
The word that's most closely associated historically, anyway, over the last 50, 100 years, is that guys would get called a jerk. And women have only ever called guys jerks if they like them. And it's interesting to note that they're only calling guys that they're attracted to jerks. They never call nice guys jerks, right? So, you know, when there's a conflict between what's said and what's done, yeah, she might call the guy a jerk, but if she's attracted to him, there's something about that guy that draws her in. You know, I've said this before. It's assholes that get things done in the world.
So you talk about handling difficulties, problems in a relationship that with women, anger just doesn't work.
Yeah.
What in that it's best to stay calm and collected. Why do you go that route versus anger?
I mean, we've all tried the anger route. I certainly have. It doesn't work. You can raise your voice, you know, blow off steam. You know, I've seen guys punch holes in the wall, stuff like that. That just doesn't work. Like you're essentially giving her what she wants. She wants a rise out of you. And with women, and I've only learned this in the last few years, it's actually crueler to be cool. So when they try to push your buttons and get under your skin and get you to snap or, you know, um, just get a strong reaction out of you. It's better just to be cool, turn 180 degrees in that direction, and then proceed to walk that way and just walk away from it. You know, engaging in that kind of drama or you know, anger with her, it just doesn't work out. And in today's era of like, you know, Me Too's and false Stevie allegations, anything can be used against you. And, you know, if you have a temper, it's one of the worst things that you can have in a relationship, and especially if you're going through a divorce, because it will be used against you.
No, that's true. And women do. They poke and prod because they want to get that rise. And they
Yeah.
want you to get
So you
fired
so
up.
you
And
deny them
it's
of
like
that.
our only tool. It's our only weapon. It's like, oh, okay,
Correct.
if we can make you emotional, then whatever the issue we're talking about, now we're fighting about a whole different
Yeah.
subject. Now, I will say, if you are typically calm and collected and handling a woman correctly, sometimes raising your voice, adding that bass to your voice where she knows like, woman, I'm serious. That
Yeah.
very much, I call that like, a display of masculine power periodically. We need to see that because
Yeah, I have a really good
sometimes you
example
might
for
forget
you
that
on that
that's
too.
there.
Yeah, I have a really good example for you on that too. So a
Okay.
really good friend of mine, you know, we were talking about that exact scenario, and he was having a dispute with his wife. They were out at a formal event. She was in a dress and high heels and sort of thing, and she was trying to push his buttons. And the way he said it to her, it was perfectly executed. He said something along the lines of, "It'll be a long walk home in those high heels." And she just shut up. It worked perfectly.
You can't logic a woman out of emotion. Like you
You
wait, you
lose.
have to wait for her to get
Even
back
if you
to a
win, you lose.
baseline to be able to have any kind of fruitful conversation whatsoever. You don't even know like if what she's saying is true or if she's just hungry. Okay, let's talk for a minute about jealousy. I think jealousy in the right amount can be quite productive in keeping a woman interested and knowing
Yeah.
that you have value and options. What's your thoughts about using jealousy to your favor?
It's a really powerful tool. You want to deploy it with some discretion though, because if you make her too jealous, she'll make your life a nightmare. You can sort of activate that thing in her where she'll monitor everything. She'll go through your pockets, your car. She'll look for hairs. She'll look at receipts. And even if nothing exists, maybe something exists. But even if nothing exists, she'll find something to get upset about. There's the old saying about if you go digging for dirt, you're going to find it, right? You go looking for trouble, you're going to find it. But at the end of the day, like women do want what other women want. That's the easiest way for women to assess the value of a man. And if you're invisible to other women and they don't notice you and they don't express even a little bit of desire for you, like I'll give you a very simple example. If you go to a restaurant and the waitress is a little bit flirtatious with you, maybe she smiles a little bit more than the average waitress would. Maybe she kind of winks a little bit. Maybe she calls you honey, right? These sorts of things will develop a little bit of competition anxiety in your girlfriend, your wife, whoever it happens to be. And her just seeing other women expressing levels of interest for you is actually a good thing for that relationship. If she doesn't get a little bit jealous of you, even just a little bit, that relationship is going to end at some point, right? Like, again,
Yeah,
it really
it's
just
pretty
boils
close.
down to this. Women want what other women want. And the surest way for a woman to assess the value of a man is for him to be in the vicinity or have attractive women expressing interest in him.
Yeah, it doesn't take much too. I mean, I don't think that most time, even just bringing up a woman's name in a story or conversation with your wife is enough for her wheels to get going. Like, who is this? Who is
Sure.
Tina? Why is he talking? Why is he thinking about Tina? We don't need any help on your guys' side to get jealous. Trust me. Don't try to calm that jealousy too much. Let's use that to your benefit for the
She should
relationship,
have a little bit of
essentially.
something to worry about for sure.
One of the biggest mistakes I'm seeing with men is that there's just no standards at all regarding how their women treat them. And this is creating a low level of respect on the woman's side. Why is
Mhm.
respect such a huge deal for men? And do you think that women understand your guys' need for respect? Because I know I didn't until a couple of years ago.
A lot of that comes from culture and societal conditioning because women are told to be a challenge, be a little bit difficult, offer them a little bit of a challenge, which often translates to disrespect, pushing back in certain areas, not conceding to things that they really should, that aren't that big of a deal that he's got or that he should have the frame in. For the ladies watching, if there are any, is you cannot disrespect a man. You need to find a way to be useful in his life, and you need to offer him enthusiastic, mind-bending sex that you've never offered to any other guy. If you can do those three things effectively and manage it properly, there's really no reason for him to leave that relationship. Women will bang a guy even if they don't like him, but if they respect him, she'll still bang a guy that she respects, right? But when you lose a woman's respect, you're kind of losing that relationship. It's kind of ending.
So you don't need to, as a woman, respect a man just to have sex with him. But when you're talking about a relationship, especially a long-term relationship, respect is so important for her to maintain that attraction. It's the mental attraction part of it.
Correct.
So you have to have the physical attraction, but the mental attraction that comes through being a man that she can respect is what's going to allow you to run the distance.
And contempt ties in very closely with respect. And contempt is the clock that ticks down to the end of a relationship. If a woman expresses contempt for you as a man, she doesn't respect you. It's the same thing in a business transaction, right? Like if you have a business partnership or somebody that works for you and they express contempt or smugness or something like that, they just don't respect you. You got to get rid of that guy.
you must deal with disrespect immediately. I know that you said that in the book. I completely agree with you there. I will say
Yeah.
though, as a point to the guys, sometimes we don't even know we're being disrespectful. Sometimes the
Correct.
things that one man finds disrespectful, another man might not find disrespectful. Sometimes we think we're being helpful. Sometimes we're pointing out a
Yeah.
spot to go park in. For some reason, we don't think you have eyeballs.
These little indignities that stack up, that, become a snowball, become a giant sort of like landslide after a while. And, if you allow them to happen early on, they will continue. You're gonna basically teach her how to treat you, which is gonna come with some disrespect, and she'll continue to express disrespect, which ties into contempt. And again, contempt is the end of the relationship. If a woman doesn't respect you and expresses contempt, it's pretty much done.
No, I agree. That have you seen that video going around with JD Vance and Erica Kirk? The way
Yeah,
that
with her
she's
hand on the
hugging
back of
him.
his head, that one.
Yes. So
Yeah.
there's a big debate about whether that is disrespectful. We can't even agree if a woman grasping another married man's head in an intimate manner is disrespectful or not. For the record, I
I
think it's
mean,
atrocious and highly disrespectful to his wife. So,
mhm.
what's your thoughts
Well,
of that whole scenario?
yeah. So if their families were close, they were friends. I don't really see a problem with the hand placement on the back of his head. She didn't do any. I mean, it's bordering on an area that was, kind of, but I mean, clearly a problem for a lot of people. But if they were very friendly, the Kirk family with the Vance family, and they've known each other for a while, a warm embrace with a hand on the back of the head, I don't really see a problem with something like that.
My husband said that he didn't see anything wrong with it either, and I'm like, you can't touch a man the same way that you touch another woman, even if she embraces another
But
woman that way. I
got it.
thought
But
it
I mean,
was
like, you
super
got to
shady.
understand that JD Vance is a highly respected guy that's climbed the ranks of men around him. He's the vice president. He's the number two guy. So it's not that unusual for a woman to sort of express that. I mean, you could call it attraction, you could call it like a touch point or whatever it happens to be. But clearly, you would have an issue with it if a woman did that to your husband. He didn't
Oh,
see an issue with
absolutely.
it based on the circumstances. But you can understand why women would have an issue with it, because it starts to lean towards intimacy. It clearly
Right.
shows a sign of maybe some level of attraction for him,
Right.
which is why the women would have an issue with it. I'm
Gotcha.
also from a European family, so we're very touchy. Like, when you run in a family, there's kisses on the cheeks and that sort of stuff, and you embrace each other. So it really depends on what their upbringing was. If I'm not mistaken, I think Erica Kirk is Eastern European, isn't she?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure she is. You guys can fact check it in the comments, but that might be like her upbringing too, right?
Right. I do know that she hugs. There's pictures of her hugging the same way. Well, just for any of my viewers who happen to be female, don't ever hug my men that way. There's going to be problems. Um, I'm just laying out. There's going to be problems. Let's go on to part three, which is Steve from Accounting's how-to guides. But one of those guides was how to deal with a high conflict ex-wife. I thought it was quite practical into just how to deal with a high conflict woman in general.
In general.
What is the
Yeah.
general way that men should be handling high conflict women?
Yeah. So Steve's story is interesting. I met him, I think 2018 or 17 or something like that. He was actually a coaching client, and he was going through his divorce at the time, and I was helping him with that. And then, he became my book editor because he publishes books. So his origin with those recommendations, and they're really good, by the way, the additions that he's added to the book, is essentially, following my guidance of it's actually crueler to be cool. Like, you stick to the point. He talks a lot about using AI, Chat GPT, Grok, things like that, to sort of water down the message and get to the point. And I've actually used AI a little bit more lately, especially if you're dealing with something confrontational. Could be in business, could be in a relationship, for example. But if you sort of type something out and then you give it to AI and say, just deal with the facts and take the emotion out of it, it's actually quite good at distilling it down. And that's the guidance that he really gives. If you're going through the divorce, if you're going through a breakup and you're dealing with the courts and family laws in your life, and it's contentious, and the custody of your kids or the access to your kids is sort of up in the air, the worst thing that you can do is infuse levels of emotion into the transaction, and especially recorded communication, texts, emails, things like that. that could be leveraged against you in the family courts. Women get a pass most of the time, you know, when it comes to stuff like that. They're kind of expected to be more emotional than men, but you don't get a pass as a guy, right? Like you can't type out an email and then call her a, you know, see you next Tuesday sort of thing, right? Like you have to be very to the point. It's about the issue, or it's about the kids. Remove the emotion. Let her pepper it with emotion if she wants. You just step away from it. And he's got some really good actionable advice about how to navigate that through a divorce, because he went through a very, very difficult one.
We have technology. Use it to your benefit there. Well, Rich, you have a really great follow-up book to your original bestseller. I'm sure it's going to be another
Yeah, I appreciate that.
bestseller and helpful to a lot of the men and maybe the handful of women who might be interested in reading it. Where can people find your new book?
It's on Amazon. Title is A Top Shelf Man. You can find it by searching the title and my author name, Richard Cooper. And the Audible will be available by January. So you've got print, Kindle, and hardback. You can also find everything else on my website at richcooper.ca.
And I'll put all of your links in the description as always. And I would just really appreciate you coming on for a third time.
YouTube and
So
everything.
we'll see you next time.